Thanks for staying with us, everyone. You're watching What Now? I am Precious Amayu. Now let's start with the major topic of conversation in the country today, which is Nigeria's fight against terrorism, which has now recorded a major development as the armed forces of Nigeria, working alongside the United States, carried out precision airstrikes against ISIS-linked foreign elements operating in parts of northwest Nigeria.
The military says the operation was approved by the appropriate federal government authorities and forms part of ongoing effort to eliminate terrorist groups and criminal networks threatening national security. According to the armed forces, the strikes were based on credible intelligence and careful operational planning aimed at degrading terrorist capabilities while minimizing harm to civilians. U.S. Africa Command later confirmed that the strike was carried out in Sokoto State on Christmas Day at the request of the Nigerian authorities, resulting in the killing of multiple ISIS terrorists. In a post on X, AFRICOM confirmed the operation, while U.S. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth praised the readiness of American forces and expressed appreciation for Nigeria's cooperation. The strike marks the first known U.S. military action in Nigeria under President Donald Trump and comes amid renewed security cooperation between both countries. President Trump, reacting on his Truth Social platform, said the operation was meant to send a strong message to the militant and commended the U.S. military for carrying out what he described as a decisive mission. Nigeria's Ministry of Foreign Affairs says the operation followed sustained intelligence sharing, strategic coordination, and bilateral cooperation with international partners, including the United States, in line with international law and respect for Nigeria's sovereignty. The ministry stressed that all counter-terrorism efforts are focused on protecting civilian lives, preserving national unity, and safeguarding the right of all Nigerians, regardless of religion or ethnicity. The federal government has also confirmed that President Bola Tinubu approved the joint operation. Foreign Affairs Minister Yusuf Tuga explained that the strikes were conducted as a joint effort and were not targeted at any religious group, emphasizing that Nigeria remains a multi-religious nation united against terrorism.
A day after the strike in Sokoto State, the natives of Jabo, a rural community in Tambuwal local government area, are taking stock of its effect, and they say there's been damage to their farmlands, but no loss of lives. They are also calling for more intelligence reports on the security situation in Sokoto State. In the meantime, the police command in Sokoto State has cordoned off the site.
No loss of life, no loss of property, because it fell on farms, not in people's buildings.
In the meantime, the police command in Sokoto State has cordoned off the site where the explosive device detonated. A military personnel attached to the forward operating base were said to have arrived at the scene before the arrival of an explosive ordnance disposal team from Sokoto, securing and removing fragments of the device to their base for further examination. And joining me now to analyze this strike on ISIS from the UK is international affairs analyst Dr. Bola Adediro. And from Washington, D.C., a partner with Gainful Solutions, Stephen Hayes. They are both joining me virtually. Good to have you join us.
Well, thank you for having me.
So let me begin with you, Mr. Hayes. I just want to get your just the update on how this is being reported in the U.S. and how Americans are reacting to it.
Well, I think Americans generally are probably cautiously positive. I'm not necessarily speaking for myself, but I think the general tenor here is that it's welcomed. Certainly, it's welcomed by Trump's base of strong conservative Christians, but I think there's also a general sense, to some extent, perhaps inaccurate, of Christian persecution in Nigeria. And I think that's a misinterpretation to some extent, but nevertheless, I think that's how most Americans perceive it right now, because that's how it's usually presented in news and politics. So I think in general, it's cautiously positive. And I think there's a lot, we've just got to wait and see the results, and I think it's only the beginning.
I want to get to your, Dr. Hayes, Mr. Hayes, I'm staying with you. I want to get to your own, your assessment of that strike as well, and what you make of it.
Well, we don't really know how large the strike was. If it's just a single strike, or was it in several places. I was under the impression it was more than just one place that hit farmland. So I think that's going to determine a lot. I think people are waiting to assess. I hope they're waiting to assess it rather than making quick judgments to see what are the fatalities, if it is really precision bombing. I've always been skeptical of anything that claims to be precision bombing, because there's always fatalities that unintended with any type of bombing. But nevertheless, I think it's generally, again, I think it's seen as a positive, but I think people are going to be concerned as to how this is going to draw us in. One of the positives is, I think, is the Nigerian government and U.S. government cooperation, and I think that's badly needed, and I think it's a positive to this. There's several cautionary points too to be said, but we can discuss that as well.
Absolutely, because I know you mentioned cautiously assessing the situation, and then you talked about the cautionary measures as well, and I will get to you just in a moment on that as I bring in Dr. Bola now. Dr. Bola, beyond just being an international relations expert, you also are an international security expert. Just from that standpoint of international security, what's your assessment?
Well, my research has always been on this concept of the responsibility to protect. The idea that when people are at the risk of mass atrocity crimes, which we do know were going on in parts of Nigeria, that we have a responsibility to protect them. And that responsibility stays with the host government, which the Nigerian government, but when the Nigerian government is manifestly unable and unwilling to protect its citizens, that responsibility transfers to the international community. So from that standpoint, and from international legal norms, you could say that this particular act or particular military strike keeps in line with the general norms of international relations or international security norms, which is that when, as I said, when people are being persecuted and when people are at the risk of mass atrocity crimes, there's a duty to do something, a duty to act. However, from a personal perspective, as a Nigerian, I feel that this is a very concerning development. It is a Pandora box that we have just opened, and I do not completely buy the idea that the Nigerian government has fully supported this. In fact, I feel that from the discussions and from the statements of the President Donald Trump on November 20th, saying that it was going to go into Nigeria gun blazing, that the Nigerian government has been held hostage and has been forced to agree to this particular military strike or be disregarded. And what we've seen Bola, is
if I may comment,
the diplomatic off-ramp. Yeah.
Yeah, just to follow up on what you just said, because that's some of the arguments we're seeing both sides. Some who believe that this was done without the knowledge of the Nigerian government. The military has come out to say, they provided the Minister of Foreign Affairs said they provided intelligence. The military said they did it side by side. But let's not forget that in the wake of that comment being made by President Trump, that Nigeria sent a high-level delegation to the U.S. Led by the NSA. And then we also saw a delegation from the U.S. coming to Nigeria, and they both said the same thing, that they had agreed on a collaboration. Couldn't this be more like an offshoot of that meeting between both sides?
What we know about President Donald Trump is that he's a showman. Yeah, I mean, this particular action, as Mr. Hayes has mentioned, jives with this conservative base. There are, strong members of the MAGA movement who believe that Nigerian Christians are being persecuted. And I think that, yes, there might be some some arguments to that effect, even though the general targets of ISIS have not, and Boko Haram have not necessarily been only Christians. I mean, Muslims have also been killed. But what I see is that Donald Trump, from my perspective, and my educated guess, is that Donald Trump would have taken an action regardless, and the Nigerian government was quite aware of this. Of course, we know what what Donald Trump has done in other places, including not only Iran, but Syria, Libya, Somalia, where overt actions like this have been taken. So the Nigerian government was wise to seek a diplomatic offer, to give it the impression that it is collaborating with the United States government. But make no mistake about it, if it had taken a different position to the U.S. government's position, Donald Trump would have gone ahead regardless.
All right, let me bring back Stephen Hayes into the conversation. I mean, you listened to Dr. Bola. I want to get to your reaction to what he said in terms of the idea that this was a collaboration.
Well, I think it was a collaboration. I think there's been a failure of the Nigerian government to protect. I think the professor's comments were right on by and large. I found little to disagree, but I don't think that the U.S. would have gone in without the Nigerian statement that this was a collaborative effort. How much pressure is on Nigeria is another question, but I think there is also there is in Nigeria a recognition that this has to be addressed more effectively. I've heard that from citizens in Nigeria, and not simply the Trump administration. I think that Trump's rhetoric, unfortunately, does distort the reality on almost anything, frankly. But I think that there is a need to address this issue. Yes, I also think that there was pressure from the United States on Nigeria to do this, and perhaps that is a good thing. We will see. That's why I'm thinking that we need to be very cautious to see what happens from this step on. I think there is a danger of of this expanding regionally now, and we'll see. I personally
and we'll get to that because that's a huge conversation on how what the Sahel and West Africa will respond to this, because this the idea the conflict around, or the crisis around ISWAP and Boko Haram has been very much a West African and a Sahel issue more than it is even a Nigerian issue. We'll take a break now. I'll put you both on hold. And when we return, we'll continue the conversation. Stay with us, everyone.
Thank you.
All right, thank you so much for staying with us, everyone. You're watching What Now? We've been talking about the strikes carried out by the Nigerian Army or Nigerian military alongside the US military as well in Sokoto State. Well, yet to get, details are still sketchy. We're yet to get more details as to the effect of the strike. But we've been having a conversation with an international affairs analyst, Dr. Bola Adediran, as well as the partner Gainful Solution, Stephen Hayes. Thank you both for staying with us. Dr. Adediran, I want to come to you because, again, we also saw that comment from, well, he's called War Secretary now. Some also call him Defense Secretary in the U.S., Pete Hegseth, also thanking the Nigerian government for working with them. Let's go with that idea that this was done in collaboration with the federal government, because both sides have said so. But does that lay to rest the conversation around Nigeria's sovereignty? Because you mentioned that this does open Pandora's box.
Yes, under international law, it would not be a violation of Nigeria's territorial integrity if Nigeria has done this and has not been held hostage, as I was insinuating earlier. So it would be in keeping with international norms, and we've done this across West Africa. We've done this in Liberia. We've done this in Sierra Leone, and even recently we went into Benin Republic and we suppressed a possible coup there. So that would not be a violation of international international law or whatsoever. What I am concerned about, as I said, is that it opens a Pandora box. The possibility, and we've seen this in the past before, where the U.S. has taken this as a license to conduct drone attacks even against the host state's approval. We saw that in Pakistan. We saw that in Afghanistan. We've seen that in Yemen. We've seen that in Somalia. We've seen that in Libya. We've seen that in Syria. We've seen that in many countries. And this, for me, is the concerning part, that the U.S. may take this, especially when at a critical time like this, when we have a president who wants to use that opportunity also to bolster his conservative base and to also bolster his popularity in the U.S. and to use that as a means to willy-nilly cause havoc in the northwestern part of Nigeria.
So, Mr. Hayes, I'll come to you. I'll ask you first, again, to react to what Dr. Bola said in terms of, because you had also talked about caution. And people are saying, look, what is the motive for this? President Trump had talked about how this is about Christian genocide as he has tagged it. But some say, look, it could lead to more ask. And I'm wondering if you share those sentiments as well.
Well, I do share most of what Dr. Bola has just said. I think there's a general concern. We do have a record of going beyond the government. In this case, I think it's somewhat different. I hope that the cooperation, I think, will continue. I think that we are more prone to cooperate with Nigeria rather than Pakistan, for instance, because of the circumstances, or Syria in the Middle East, because simply they would not have been given permission. And whether it was right to go forward or not, the fact is, in fact, we did. So I think the concern is legitimate. My concern also, and again, I think it's positive beyond his base. Certainly, the president wanted to encourage his base, which is starting to flag in support of him right at this moment. So the timing is interesting. Also, that it was done on Christmas Day is interesting to me. But nevertheless, I think Dr. Bola has legitimate concerns. That doesn't mean that he or
Mr. Hayes, apologies for butting. I'm trying to manage time, just so we can get so many questions in. Now, just beyond the timing of it and appealing to his base, let's talk about the framing of this. President Trump labeled the group terrorist.com, and he said that it had been targeting and viciously killing primarily innocent Christians. That's how he framed when he released a statement. But the Nigerian government described this as simply a targeting of terrorists. Why does just very different? There's a difference in the framing by both sides, and I'm wondering why framing matters here.
Well, framing does matter, and I think President Trump is wrong, or let me say, rather than wrong, is simplistic in his views of what's going on. I think the conflict in Nigeria is far more complex. The different issues beyond just Christians and Muslims, and I think he's framing that more for his own popularity and possibly a very simplistic understanding of it. That's increasingly possible too, I think, and that would be unfortunate.
All right, let me bring in Dr. Bola. Dr. Bola, let's get to the conversation that Mr. Hayes raised earlier about what it means for West Africa and the Sahel, because this is a general issue in that region. And I wanted to ask you, because the area where this happened shares a border with Niger. And then we know that Niger had pulled out of the Joint Task Force in the wake of that coup. And I'm wondering what implication this will have for the region and how Nigeria should engage in a way that, there's a proper understanding of what this is.
Do you mind if I could quickly go back to what you were saying earlier? And for me,
go ahead,
for me, I think that the framing really, really matters. And for the framing, in my opinion, even shows that this was not, this is something that the Nigerian government is really, really careful about and understands the implication. Now, if you go back to the beginning of the modern war on terrorism in the 1990s, after the Gulf War, part of the reason why Osama bin Laden started his righteous, jihad against the U.S. was the base that the the U.S. government had in Saudi Arabia, and the fact that they felt that infidel goods should not be in Islam's holiest land. So Islam has always had a very massive discomfort around supposed infidels, and I wonder whether the Nigerian government is aware or is afraid that the perception that the Nigerian government is collaborating with supposedly the US may ignite further unrest within the Northwest, and also, invite more radicals from other parts of the world, including Mali and other countries. And you don't want Nigeria to be a hotbed of this international jihadists coming to fight the great Satan, quote and unquote. So the framing really matters. And I think that the Nigerian government is quite aware that, and that's why I don't think that the Nigerian government would have would have collaborated with the US on this issue, with all its completely without any sort of inhibition or hindrance. It's because it had no choice really, but acquiescence. I think that framing is really important.
I will again tell you what, but I just want to answer the second question. The Minister of Foreign Affairs also spoke to it, and I will tell you what he said in just a moment. But answer the first question.
Oh, well, the implications are very vast, obviously, for the Sahel region. I think that if an action has been taken in Nigeria, it also gives the US also the opportunity to target other Sahel countries. And I think it also, at a broader, from a broader perspective, it also questions Nigeria's diplomatic stance or the diplomatic positioning among Sahel countries, and I think there are implications for that. So that would be my response. That there are vast consequences for countries like Niger, Chad, Mali, and all the sort of jihadist actions we're seeing in some of these countries.
So, Dr. Bola, we have just about 2-3 minutes left before I go to Mr. Hayes. Again, what I inferred from the minister's comments this morning, or statement this morning, was that there had been an agreement on how this should be framed. But, of course, President Trump went ahead with how he wanted to frame it. Again, because he had talked about Christian genocide, so he framed it around that as well. But, Mr. Hayes, let me come to you. There is a talk about, Pete Hegseth did talk about more strikes to come. What, in your mind, does that mean, and what can we expect just based on that statement?
Well, it's hard to predict, quite honestly, and I'm not ducking your question. I think that it means that literally there will be more strikes in cooperation with the Nigerian government. And I do think the Nigerian government did reason this out, did see it in their best interest to cooperate. So I have a varying shade of interpretation from Dr. Bola, who I find is excellent. But in any case, I think that the interpretation in the U.S. has to change. And whether President Trump will do that or not, he operates in a very simplistic communication. And I do think the Nigerian government is absolutely right the way it needs to be phrased, and I hope that happens here in the United States as well.
And in 30 seconds, if you can speak to the idea of, that, because you mentioned it earlier, how Nigeria should begin to engage with the West Africa and what this strike means for other countries battling with terrorism as well in the region.
Well, actually, I think it may give Nigeria a much stronger hand. It's cooperating with the U.S. I think it can step up to a leadership role, which it traditionally has had, but I think is lost in West Africa. But I think Dr. Bola is 100% correct. We are probably going to see this as an expansion. There will be rush in to help the jihadists. And so I think it's going to be very, very tricky to manage, but I think it's almost inevitable right now.
All right, it's a development that we're following. Like I said earlier, details as is sketchy. Hopefully, details around that on a need-to-know basis will be released to the Nigerian people just for this for accountability's sake. But thank you both for talking to us. International Affairs Analyst, Dr. Bola Adediran, always a pleasure to have you on. And partner Gainful Solutions, Mr. Stephen Hayes, again, always a pleasure to have you on too.
An honor as usual. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, that's What Now. For more updates on this story, which is a strike in Sokoto, you can visit our website. And other international stories is www.tvcnews.tv. You can also follow us on our social media handles. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and on X at TVC News NG. We'll also have updates for you on WhatsApp and Telegram at TVC News Nigeria, and YouTube or live at TVC News Nigeria. Thanks for watching. I am Precious Amayu.